everybody says, it seems that they're saying, never accept the first offer on your house. Well, I think that's wrong. I had a seller recently who waited nearly 2 weeks chasing a better deal, only to get that better deal and then to watch it completely fall apart. Meanwhile, I have had 3 other sellers where they accepted the very first offer they received, and every one of those transactions is moving smoothly toward closing. So is the old saying, your first offer is your best offer, actually making a comeback? Let's talk about it. Back in the day, olden days, there was a saying that your first offer is typically your best offer. But ever since 2020, when the market changed to heavily favoring sellers, we fell into a new normal. That new normal being multiple offers on almost every listing, making an early bidder wait sometimes as much as a week before setting a deadline calling for highest and best, and giving everybody who showed the house over that period of time an opportunity to bring in an offer. So we would set a deadline and then compare the many offers that the seller was lucky enough to have. This is great for sellers because then they could compare and contrast terms, and we actually would have sellers sometimes who would pick a lower offer because of better terms. Or we would get a bunch of offers kind of all in the same price range and term range, and then you'd get one that was far and above the rest. This quickly morphed into a situation where buyers became accustomed to having to wait, and the first question when they were looking at a house or even deciding to see it would be, what's the deadline for your offers? Taking it one step further, listing agents were actually publishing offer guidelines. They would tell you what's important to the seller and basically pretty much tell the buyer exactly what to offer. Sellers were getting presumptuous, or I don't want to say greedy, because it wasn't, they thought they were just doing what you needed to do because sellers only sell their houses every once in a while. They had no idea this wasn't really normal. So anyway, they would go as far as saying, okay, we want to close on this date and we want a free rent back for 30 days. Listing agents would tell us that their seller will only consider an offer if there's no inspection contingency, or they would only accept an offer if you waived the appraisal. From the very beginning of doing this, I did not like buyer guidelines. I felt it was insulting to buyer's agents who were trying to give their clients the best advice possible. But what ended up happening is that all they needed to do, buyer's agents, was show their client the list of guidelines and then write up what the seller was looking for in order to be the winning bid. Meanwhile, the buyer who made the first offer maybe before the guidelines weren't distributed has been waiting. So like I said, I stopped using offer guidelines. I felt like by giving buyers and buyer's agents a list of things they needed to do to make their offer win or to even make their offer competitive, that we were getting offers that weren't necessarily exactly what the buyer wanted to offer. In fact, I found cases where the buyer didn't even realize some of the terms that were in their offer. And this often led to issues during attorney review or during inspection periods where we ended up renegotiating terms. Deals were becoming increasingly uncomfortable. I also feel if you don't give guidelines, you actually have another metric by way to measure or assume or predict how smoothly the deal might go. Because an offer that's presented in a messy manner might be foreshadowing how the deal will unfold. Okay, back to my original statement, which was about the old rule that your first offer is usually your best offer. 3 scenarios recently in which a seller actually took the first offer, and then a 4th scenario where the seller played 2 offers against each other, spanning the course of almost 2 weeks, finally accepting one and then having it fall apart during the inspection period because I don't think that buyer knew that the agent told them that they needed to limit their inspection and repair requests. I'm not suggesting that you always and only take the first offer, but if it's a solid offer, maybe the buyer knew there would be multiple offers, so they put their best foot forward first and early. Why would you wait for more offers to come in? Offers that may not be anywhere near as good as the one you have in your hand. If the first offer comes in and it's under list price or has funky terms and you've only been on the market a couple of days, that's a buyer that's looking for a deal, or maybe a buyer who's working with an agent that failed to explain the nature of the market. That's a scenario where I would probably recommend waiting, at least until anybody else who currently has appointments scheduled gets a chance to see the house and has an opportunity to make an offer. At which point I would recommend that we set a deadline. I'd let the first buyer know that we're waiting for the rest of the showings to be complete and that we'll be reviewing offers 3 days from now at 4 p.m. Listen, you may not get any more offers, or maybe you will get offers that aren't as good as your first one, or maybe you will get a better offer. In that scenario, typically I would go back to the first bidder, give them what I affectionately call last licks, meaning they made their offer without knowing what the competition was going to look like. And now that there's competition, I ask them if they want to improve their bid. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I had a scenario recently where the seller received 2 offers after having been on the market for quite some time, which is an indicator that the list price wasn't accurate. Neither of these offers were list price. Instead of setting a deadline and asking both buyers to come in with their highest and best offer, my seller had me negotiate both offers at the same time. They had me leveraging each offer against the other. It was an incredibly uncomfortable situation for me. I could tell that the agents were getting annoyed. Finally, one of them just said to me, "Tell me what I need to do and I'll tell my client to do it." So I communicated that to my seller, who said, "All right, well, tell them if they give us $10,000 more, we'll take their offer." Well, that buyer came up $5,000 more, and we did take their offer. Guess what? That buyer did not stand by the inspection language that they had put in the contract. They presented a repair request list that was as long as my right arm. And when we pushed back on their requests and asked them to honor their contract, they terminated the contract. Let's contrast that story to another listing I had where we got an offer on the first Saturday of showings. It followed all of the guidelines that people have been asking for without me giving them guidelines, meaning they came in strong, they waived the appraisal, they said they would only ask for inspection repairs if each repair exceeded $1,500. They said they would close when the seller wanted them to. It was an extremely solid offer, and my client was inclined to accept that offer right away. In this case, we did wait overnight because there had been another showing on Saturday where the agent called me and said, "My client is going to make an offer, I'll have it to you tonight." So we were expecting a second offer. When that second offer came in, it was nowhere near as strong as the one we had in hand. It was list price with typical terms. My client didn't even hesitate. He asked me to go ahead and accept the first offer and to apologize for making them wait 24 hours. The buyer was thrilled. We just cleared the inspection contingency and we have the mortgage commitment. All of that happened in the first 2 weeks after signing the contract. That buyer decided to offer those wonderful terms. He didn't do it because he was staring down the competition and checking off a list of offer guidelines. And in that case, that first offer was the best offer. One more story. We recently had an early offer that was very good and the client accepted it. They were happy with it. However, whenever our buyer agent was making an appointment and asked if we had any offers in hand and we answered honestly, they were getting frustrated and aggravated and upset that we already had an accepted offer and that they didn't even have an opportunity. Back in the day, when a property came on the market, you took your client to see it and they made an offer if they liked it. Those days are kind of gone because everybody expects there's going to be a deadline. Everybody expects that you'll have at least a week to look at the house. Well, one of these agents that was particularly aggravated wrote up an offer anyway, submitted it directly to the attorneys, which you don't necessarily have to do. You can send it to the listing agent. A seller can look at offers all the way till closing. Now, if you're under contract, that's a little bit dicey. But my point is here, that offer did come in higher than the one that was accepted, but not by much. We were still in attorney review, so he could have accepted that higher offer, but they decided to honor the offer they accepted. That deal has made it through the inspections, got the mortgage commitment in hand, all contingencies have been met, and both parties are happy. So maybe the old saying isn't really making a comeback. Maybe it never completely went away. The lesson here isn't always take your first offer. The lesson is to evaluate the offer that's actually in front of you instead of simply assuming that something better is coming. A great first offer deserves to be treated like a great first offer. Sometimes waiting creates more competition. Sometimes it just creates more risk. Every house, every seller, and every market is different. That's why strategy matters more than rules. That's why I say one of the reasons I love this business is because I can tell you from A to Z all the steps that need to happen from the time you put a sign in the ground or from the time you meet a buyer's agent until that property is closed and the moving truck arrives. But no two deals are the same. So if you're selling your home, don't make decisions based on old sayings or today's headlines or what your neighbor tells you. Make them based on facts, the strength of the offer, and a strategy that's tailored to your situation. If you're thinking about selling in New Jersey and you'd like to talk through what that strategy should look like, of course, I'd be happy to help. Jen Blanchard, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Fox & Roach Realtor. Our office is in Basking Ridge, but we serve a big part of our state. So if you have any real estate questions, let me know.